I'm John Kovach. I'm a newspaper editor. I'm a radio announcer. I'm a high school football coach. And since I was old enough to stand on the side of a stream next to my dad, I've been an angler. I've fished with bait, lures, and flies. I've fished with spinning gear, fly rods, jigging poles, and tip-ups. I've stood on ice, waded rapids, and been tossed about the deck of a boat. And I want you to love fishing, be it freshwater or salt, heavy flows, high seas, or cutting through a foot of ice, as much as I do. No matter what the quarry, no matter the tactics, no matter the chosen tackle. Welcome to Yankee Fisherman. Everybody, welcome to Yankee Fisherman, presented by the Dock Shop on the HAN Network. John Kovach with you this Thursday, January 21st, joined here in the studio by a special guest. Rich Strolis has stopped by. He's incredibly busy this time of year, flying all over the country, doing shows. He stopped by to talk to us about his book, one of the best-selling new fishing books that's out there right now, and that is Catching Shadows. Rich, thanks for joining us on Yankee Fisherman.
Thanks for having me.
How'd you come up with the title? I find it very poetic.
Well, I have a webpage, which a lot of people are pretty familiar with, and the title itself is kind of like embodies everything with fishing. When you're out there fly fishing, you're kind of looking for those shadows in the water and stuff. So the title of the book was probably an afterthought, to be quite honest with you. I had a webpage built and kind of trademarked my my business name after that because I was a guide. And then my publisher from Stackpole was the one that really kind of pushed me to use that in the marketing. So it was kind of like by happenstance that it happened. So, and then it, with the subtitle came with it. So it was kind of by accident, to be quite honest with you.
I just really find it, like you said, it captures what you're doing because you are chasing shadows out there.
Absolutely. So
you're quite successful at finding them. How did you get started as an angler?
Well, I started out, I grew up in western Massachusetts, in the foothills of the Berkshires. Russell, it's a tiny little town right next to the town of Westfield State College, where I went to college, in fact. And when I was 5 or 6 years old, somewhere around there, my grandmother actually took me fishing at a couple of small little streams nearby the house. Yeah, so I cut my teeth at, dunking worms at first for little native brook trout, and then it just became a sickness. If I wasn't fishing, I was playing sports. And then by the age of 11, I had a lot of fascination in my father's stuff down in the basement. He's a carpenter, but he was really into fishing prior to myself coming along to the picture. And he had an old Fenwick glass fly rod that he would never let me touch. So I would always bug him about it. And I had a great Uncle Joe who actually lived down in this neck of the woods, and he was a huge angler. And finally one year my aunt, who actually is from Stratford, she bought me a fly tying setup, an Elo Bean, I believe, or a Cortland, and the whole 9 yards from there. And then the following year was a fly tying kit, and I taught myself how to not only cast and tie flies, and then that was it. It just went like that from there.
You ever get to use the fiberglass Fenwick?
Not my father's, but he was always pretty apprehensive about it because I was
probably worth more now.
Yeah, you're not kidding. It's kind of neat. So, but yeah.
Now, how does the book break down? Is this a how-to? Is it more tactics, more flies, or is this an all-inclusive on how to catch shadows?
It's a mix of everything. So aside from not just really being into fishing, I'm also big into reading fishing books. I think that kind of helped me along the way. I actually collect a lot of them. So for me, being an angler and a reader, I was really in tune to what I know most readers were looking for. So I didn't want to just do a fly tying book. I wanted to have more than that in there. So it's broken into 3 sections. There's dry flies and emergers, nymphs and streamers. Each one of those sections also has anywhere from 5 to 8 chapters on specific flies that I've come up with. And each chapter talks about my thought process, my theory with that style of fly, why I decided to design it, how it evolved, some of the trials and tribulations, some personal anecdote, places that I fished this fly or where it was built around, and then how to tie it, and also explains how to fish it all. So it's kind of like a big encyclopedia stuff. So
it sounds like it's encyclopedia, or encyclopedic, but it doesn't sound dense. It sounds like there's a lot of different things in there and shared in kind of a very relatable manner.
Absolutely. And the beautiful thing about it too is, because I've been asked this question by people, is this, centered around the Northeast? And it's really not. I mean, I've fished all over the place. And a lot of the things, my big thing with flies and tying flies is I like stuff that's going to work in a variety of settings. So with just a couple minor changes here and there, you can use these flies across the board and across the country, across the United States, across the world. So, big thing with fly tying and fishing, I don't think there's a concrete set of rules. I think it's pretty loose. And if you're willing to kind of bend them a little bit, you can find things that'll work for you no matter where you're at. And that's kind of what I wanted to embody in the book.
Is that how the design and the sports grow, is just to bend those rules a little bit? I think there's too many guys cling to, I fish exclusively dries, I'm a European nympher, all those different things. If you're open to new things, you're going to be more successful, and the journey is going to be that much more fun as you take these different paths.
Absolutely, and I think the beautiful thing about our sport, I mean, let's face it, most people when they think of fly fishing, the very first thing they think of is, dry flies. This is the first thing that comes to mind, a nice perfect drift floating on the surface and a trout sipping a bug. But there's actually so many more things to fly fishing. It's not just a trout game. It's any kind of fish that swims. You can alter your presentation or your type of imitation to try and target any of those fish. So I like to look at myself as kind of a jack of all trades. I'd be lying to you if I told you I didn't like catching fish on dry flies. I still get as much a pleasure out of doing that, but I'm also, try to make my game very well-rounded and do a little bit of everything. And that's why I kind of encompass that in the book. It's not just one specific style, and I talk about that in there as well.
I was up on the Farmington, it'll be 2 weeks ago on Sunday. Very rainy day.
Yep.
It was probably wetter in the air than it was in the water.
Yep.
And was at Upcountry to see Tori and meet a bunch of people up there. And there were a number of people coming in specifically to buy your book and talking about that was going to be their plan for the day. It's too wet to fish. I'm going to read Rich's book. But the people who had read it really giving it raves, and it looked like you're getting pretty good feedback. You were just out in Denver with the fly fishing show.
Yes.
And I know at least one big name author stopped by to say hi.
Yeah, John Gierek. It was kind of one of those, pinch yourself moments. I've read his books, for 10, 15 years now. He has like 18 titles. John writes less about technique and more about funny stories and things that I think a lot of us fishermen can relate to. And it was really surreal to be standing at my vise and the guy next to me saying, hey, look up. And, there's John there, and now he wants to talk to me about, pike fishing, because that's something else that he's really into, which myself, I've really gotten into pike fishing in the last few years. And, he's looking at my flies and asking me questions about it. So it's kind of cool to see it come full circle,
That's always fun when one of those people who you respect in fishing comes up. You've brought some flies here. What are some of your go-to flies?
Go-to flies, it all depends on, what you're looking to target. I brought a couple boxes of some dry flies and emergers that are in here. There's 2 different boxes of dries and emergers that I brought. Some are for caddis and some are for mayflies. They're both of these, every fly that you see in these boxes are actually in the book. This whole box right here that I have in my hand is actually essentially the only mayfly pattern that I fish. It's called the Shucked Up Emerger. It's got kind of a funny name, but it's nothing more than basically a snowshoe style emerger. And by just changing a couple of little minor things on this in regards to color and size, you can cover pretty much all of your mayflies with it.
Yeah, I mean, it looks like the same fly, just with different color heads on it.
Yep.
Reminds me a lot of Fran Better's The Usual.
Absolutely. There's definitely some influence there from that. And that's the beauty of fly tying, in my opinion. I think, and I talk about it a little bit in my book, I think when I do presentations on this lately, I ask the crowd, I'm like, how many people here tie their own flies? And the last one that I did, I actually had probably 95% of the people in the room. And my gut feeling with fly tyers is I think the person who ties his own flies has a little bit of an advantage over the average angler. So the nice thing is with some of these patterns, they have influence from a lot of your household patterns, but the beauty of it is if you're willing to kind of change a few things, if you have some of those tough days, you can, sometimes the fly can make the difference.
Do you find, and I know it still hits for me, but I do it on a lesser basis, obviously, than you. I still remember the first fish I caught on a fly that I tied. Mm-hmm. And I think I still get a little bit more of a charge and a little more satisfaction when I catch a fish on a fly that I tied. Does that ever fade?
For me, it doesn't. I mean, in fact, if anything, it grows more and more. I mean, I'm one of those people that's, I always trying to like push the envelope a little bit. I get as much enjoyment out of tying flies as almost as much as I do fishing.
Yes.
So it's really cool to go out there with something that you've created with your own two hands and, fool a fish or two on it. And then if you find something that's become a relatively, predominant and consistent fish catcher, even better. I can still remember the very first fish that I caught on a fly that I tied myself, and it was with a marabou or a mother minnow. So it's kind of funny because people associate me with streamer fishing a lot, that I caught one of my first hand-tied flies, caught a fish on a mother minnow. So I can totally relate to that.
Great stuff. And we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, Rich Strolis, author of Catching Shadows, is going to tie one of his flies for us. You're watching Yankee Fisherman, presented by the Dock Shop on the HAN Network. Well, there's still a bite out on the water. Most anglers have decided to stow the gear for the winter. Just because Mother Nature isn't cooperating doesn't mean you can't see the latest models of all your favorite gear. With 2 convenient locations, it couldn't be easier to get your fix of summer. Boater, beach bum, fisherman, or simply love the New England coast, this is a unique place to shop. The Dock Shop, 51 Tokenique Road, Darien, 609 Riverside Avenue, Westport, or on the web, dockshop.com.
When you experience a sports injury, you want to get better and fast. Coastal Ortho Express gives you direct access to orthopedic care quickly. Their physicians are fellowship trained in sports medicine at world-class universities and are also team doctors for area football teams. For specialized personal care of sports injuries, go to Coastal Ortho Express. Open Monday through Saturday in the iPark Building, 761 Main Avenue in Norwalk, or coastalorthoexpress.com. Coastal Orthopedics, keeping you on the move.
Here at the Darien Sports Shop, we are very excited about our newly redesigned men's department. Gentlemen, if you're shopping for work, weekend, or wedding, we've got the latest styles and trends inside our spacious new department just for you. We have vast selections from Peter Millar, Vineyard Vines, Johnny O, Duckhead, Barber, and so much more. And you can even walk out of the store in the new Wolverine 1,000-mile men's boot. Conveniently located with free and easy parking at 1127 Post Road, Darien, Connecticut, or shop us online at dariensport.com.
Hi, I'm Rob Adams with my good friend Donald Eng, and we're the home team for Nutmeg Sports, Monday through Wednesday at 2 o'clock right here on the HAN Network. We are the place for all things Connecticut sports, so come hang out with us on Nutmeg Sports. Don? They don't call him the best color man in the game for nothing. Nutmeg Sports, 2 o'clock Monday through Wednesday right here on the HAN Network.
Welcome back to Yankee Fisherman, presented by the Dock Shop on the HAN Network. John Kovach with you this Thursday. We are joined live in studio by Rich Strolis, author of Catching Shadows. It's all-encompassing. It's stories, it's flies, it's how to tie those flies, it's how to fish those flies. Rich, where can people get Catching Shadows?
You can actually get it, if you want a signed copy, I'll personalize it for you. You can get it at my webpage at www.catchingshadows.com, all in one shot. Or you can actually get it on Amazon as well. It's listed right there.
You also have some appearances. We're going to get to those later on. But right now, you're going to tie one of the flies that you can find in that book.
Yeah, I'm just going to tie a single hook streamer here. This one's called the Ice Pick. It's a fly. I've got a lot of people that know quite a bit about it. tie it in a couple different configurations. I tie it articulated with multiple hooks, but for today I'm just going to tie a single hook version of it. So I have a number 2 hook in the vise here. You can use any kind of 3x long standard vise, or a standard hook rather. This is actually a Gamakatsu SP11. I'm using some 140 UTC color yellow ultra thread. I'm just going to start by laying a nice little thread base right from the eye, and I'm going to carry that thread all the way to the bend of the hook. Once I get to that bend of that hook, I'll trim off my tag end. And I know some people will probably ask, there's not too many bait fish imitations that are yellow, but sometimes with brown trout, which we all know, yellow is a pretty good color.
It's a very good color, and there are certainly enough perch out there. Plus, you don't really have to match the natural. You have to match the shape and just give them a little flash. There are a lot of unrealistic flies to catch fish.
Sometimes you're absolutely right. A lot of times I like patterns, especially with streamers that move on their own. And you'll see this fly today has got lots of movement in it. We have rabbit strips in here. It's got some barred-eyed rabbit strips. We're going to use some marabou, which is also a common material that we use for streamers. Got some spun brushes right here. These are actually a manufactured product. It's a Enrico Puglisi sparkle brush, where you can manufacture these your own. And then some laser dubbing, which is another type of synthetic with some flash built into it.
There's a lot of flash in this.
For the most part, yeah. I mean, I fish a lot of streamers that don't have a lot of flash, but if I'm looking for one that's got a little sparkle in it, this is particularly the one that I like to tie. So I'll get back to kind of tying this here. You can see I've put a piece of 35-pound mono on here. This mono is actually going to be used on the back of this fly to build some sort of a loop, which is a foul guard. It's kind of borrowed from the saltwater crowd. So what I want to do is tie this in so that both sections of this mono lie along the shank of the hook. So I'm going to tie on the near side first, and I can tilt the vise up so you can see it. And I've pre-cut these. They're usually about 2 or 3 inches long. And once I've gone down one side, then I'm just going to take this particular other side of mono, loop it around. If I've got too much, I just trim it. What I want to do is catch it with my thread, and if it rolls a little bit, I can kind of flatten it out. And then I'm just going to advance my thread right back down to the bend, and I'll turn the vise back up once I get it so you can kind of see that both pieces of mono are lying on either side of the shank of the hook.
That was going to be my question, where you want to position that. So you've got the hook shank, and then on either side of it, there's one piece of the 35-pound mono.
Yep, and it serves 2 purposes. So I put a mono loop on here because if you look at a lot of the commercial tied rabbit strip streamers like zonkers and things of that nature, a lot of them, the tails are extremely short to prevent them from fouling. So I like to have the tails longer so I get more movement out of it because I think it's enticing to the fish. So in order for this thing to prevent or to cut down on the number of times that it fouls, because I'd be lying to you if I told you that it's not going to foul, because it's sometime if you throw an errant cast, it's going to foul. So I engineered by putting this little loop in here. And like I said, that was borrowed from the saltwater crowd. So what I typically do here now is I want to lash this piece of rabbit strip down from the rear with a few turns of thread. So I'm going to take this particular rabbit strip, put my scissors in there, and peel away the hide. So I'm right down to the bare hide. And that's where I'm going to tie this in at. Now, the other nice thing is you can see this is a 1/8 inch strip. So by laying down that base of mono, I've actually created a nice flat spot for me to put this on. Otherwise, if I didn't, it would have the tendency to roll.
That was going to be my next question. So that's going to, by expanding your surface there, you're going to have less of a problem with the rabbit first spinning around.
Absolutely. So there's a little bit of thought in there. It's kind of like I talk about it a lot with tying flies. Anybody can take a bunch of materials and put them on a hook. And you know what? It might catch some fish, but a lot of good flies, there's a lot of thought into them. And if it's kind of like building a house. If the foundation's not good, the house is going to fall apart. So your flies should be the same way. And then when you design and tie flies, you kind of have to work in reverse. You have to start backwards to work forwards because we start near the rear of the hook to work towards the front.
Right.
So after I kind of have my rabbit strip peeled apart, I take 3 or 4 turns of thread just over that one little section, and then I advance my thread in front, and I usually put a 1/2 inch on there. Now, a lot of people think those are overkill, but I like flies that are going to last, so any chance I can make them a little more durable, I do. And actually, scratch that, I forgot my tail. I'm going to cut this off. I got ahead of myself here.
That's all right.
It happens.
It's going to reassure a lot of people.
You got it. So, yeah, and listen, this happens to me at shows, too. Sometimes I fray my thread, and, you know, just because I tie thousands of flies here doesn't make me invincible. I make mistakes from time, too. So hopefully that people get that out there. So I have my 2 pieces of marabou first. What I want to do with these is measure them up to the tail or the shank of the hook here. So I take my 2 pieces together, I measure them with the shank of the hook, and then I transfer in my other hand.
Are you including the length of the foul guard?
Yes.
In the length of the shank?
Yes.
Okay.
So that right there, once I get that in place, same thing, I'm going to pick up those 2 stems, advance my thread, and then tie down over them before I clip this. Now the reason I do that is that's going to give me a uniform underbody right here. So uniformity in your flies is another thing for consistency. So
you've really expanded the shank there between the mono and the feather stem. You've really created a pretty hardy base
absolutely.
On that shank.
Absolutely. And now back to where I was before. I'm going to take my rabbit strip that I had with the hide peeled back. 3, 4, and you can tighten down on each turn. Advance your thread, just like so, to your half hitch. Now, the big thing here is I could easily go in with my scissors, but if I go in with my scissors to cut this, chances are I'm probably going to cut some of that hair. So a quick little trick is, and you can get these at your hardware store, they're getting a little bit harder to find, or you can order them, same thing like on Amazon, a double-edged razor. So I go right in, and I want to cut this hide just inside of the tips of that marabou.
And you're cutting it from the hide side, not from the hair side.
Absolutely, because if you cut the hair side, you're going to cut some of your hair. So now, and the beauty of that is, I've got no waste. So tying materials can get kind of costly, so I'm all about efficiency and saving my materials and making them go a long way.
What you've also got is that natural curvature is still there in what remains on the fly. You've still got that beautiful arc.
Absolutely.
In that barred hair.
Absolutely. So, and then the nice thing is you just kind of set that aside. Now you're ready to go for the next portion of the fly, and you've virtually wasted none of that material. So next thing I'm going to do is just take this sparkle brush here, and you can see it's got stainless steel wire in it. Just going to cut a little piece of that away. If you got brand new scissors, I don't recommend doing that. You'll probably trash your scissors. So
have old scissors for cutting the wire.
You got it. So
always.
I'm going to take that. I'm just going to lay that on the near side of the hook, and I'm just going to bind down that section of wire, and then I'm going to advance my thread right up to that point right there where my mono has ended and my underbody and my fly is.
And you've left enough room for a good head there.
Absolutely. That's key. I mean, proportions and leaving room for things is important, especially with this fly, because you'll see in a moment there's going to be actually a head put on this, and if I don't leave the space, it's not going to go on correctly.
That's about a 1/4 inch we're looking at there?
Yeah, about a 1/4 inch, give or take. So next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take that sparkle brush and I'm just going to wind that onto the shank of the hook. You could do this with your rotary function, but I prefer to do it by hand. And the biggest thing is you don't want to wrap these too close together. You want to leave a little bit of space. So probably about 1/8 of an inch.
Okay.
You can eyeball it. And the reason we do that is once we comb this out, which I'll show you in a moment, that's going to give this enough room to breathe. It'll make this move, and it gives me more than enough flash for this particular body.
That's quite a bit of flash there.
Yeah, and you'll see in a moment. Now, if you've got some errant fibers that are trapped in here, that's okay. You don't need to get too concerned about it. First thing that you want to do is you want to take 3 or 4 wraps over the top of that stainless wire, and then take 3 or 4 in front. You can put a 1/2 inch on there so it doesn't come undone. You go right in and trim that. Now the very first thing I want to do, there'll be some wire from that I've just trimmed. You're going to want to bind that down with your thumbnail, because that will actually fray your thread. And then just advance your thread back over that. Now you're probably wondering, this doesn't look too good, so what I want to do to comb this out, almost like you do with hackles and things, I'm actually going to use a piece of Velcro. You can kind of see it's a rudimentary little tool you can make with a popsicle stick from my daughters, and then just a little tab of Velcro on there, and you can use this to brush out that material. Once you've brushed that all out, then you can kind of get it where you want, and you just take your fingers, and now I can comb it backwards.
So you're directing it back, and down, and then back?
Yep, down and back.
Okay.
And then the next thing we're going to do is we're going to take that other piece of that rabbit strip, and we're just going to hold, while holding that with your opposite hand, just bind the front of that down real quickly with about 3 or 4 turns. You can cut off that little butt end. And then we're just going to make a nice little bullet-shaped head right here with the thread binding that down. And then the next thing we're going to do is make a collar on here. So we're going to take some of this laser dub, and we're going to use 2 bunches of this. You take half of what you really need. So whatever you think you're going to need to make this collar, you take half, because what we're going to do, this stuff works like wool. And you want to line up the tips on it. We're actually going to grab it right in the center and take 1, 2, 3, and you can kind of see I'm putting some pressure on there. 3 turns. And make sure you hold the thread in your other hand. If you let go of this, it's just going to explode on you. So you hold that with some pressure, and then just take your fingers and just brush this stuff backwards, advance your thread. That's called the veiling technique. And that just gives you a nice little collar. And we're going to do the same thing on the underside. I'm going to invert the vise.
Do you say take half of what you need? How are you determining what you need? It's just eyeball? It's just trial and error?
It's trial and error after a while. I mean, if you put too much on here, you're not going to be able to force that that fish skull onto the head of the fly. And the big thing is if you put too much on too, it's going to make that fly a little more buoyant, which you don't want. It's a fly that we're actually going to use a little bit deeper in the water column. So if I was to kind of guesstimate what this is, I would say probably about the end of a Q-tip is worth in diameter. And the big thing is too, you can kind of see this stuff here can kind of get all kind of tangled up on you. You want all this stuff aligned. So same thing, we're going to take another small bundle right in the center. And now this is where you got to kind of multitask. You take your other hand, pull this stuff from the top back, transition that second bunch to that same hand while you're holding that back, and do the same thing. Take 1, 2, 3 turns of it, and then just take your fingers and veil it rearward. Then advance your thread. And I've always put a half hitch on there, because if I left this and I tried to hit it again, it would probably all blast apart.
Yeah, there's a lot of potential for that to spring apart there.
You got it.
You're watching Yankee Fisherman, presented by the Dock Shop on the HAN Network. John Kovach. We are joined by Rich Strolis of Catching Shadows. He's demonstrating one of the flies from the book for us.
So I like red in a lot of my streamers. I'm going to use that same material, just in a little shade of red, and I'm going to put what we call a throat on there, which you kind of see a lot on some bait fish. So even less than what I used for that last bundle, so probably less than half of what I just used.
There's a little bit of gills imitation.
You got it. I mean, red's usually is a really good trigger in a lot of your, even in the conventional world with baits and tackle and stuff like that, and some of the lures you find. So I'm just going to do the same thing. Grab it in the middle, take 1, 2, 3 turns, veil it rearward, and then the next thing I'm going to do is just wrap right over that stuff, as you see here. Now this is all going to get covered up. I'll put a half hitch on there, and then you can actually whip finish this if you like. So I'll take a whip finish tool.
So you do half hitches and whip finish?
Yep, just so that it doesn't come undone for me, because this is kind of like one of those last little steps on there. Once that's in place, like so, I invert it back into the vise, and now I'm going to take one of these fish skulls here. This is a small medium. It's not very heavily weighted. It looks like it is. It's an alloy. It's got some eyes on it. I already pre-glued the eyes. Just going to kind of clean out the eyeball on this one here. And this is just to give it a little bit of weight, but it finishes off the fly relatively nicely. So this has a top and a bottom, so you want to make sure it's keeled. So you'll see there's more weight on the bottom of this as opposed to the top. So unless you tie this fly inverted, you're going to want to make sure you put this head on correctly. So once I put that on, and you can kind of maneuver it a little bit on there. Sometimes I'll put a little gel Loctite in there just to make sure that it stays on.
I was going to say, do you glue that in?
You can. But what I find, one of the biggest things you want to do is, you see I've left a little bit of space right here where the hook eye is. I'm actually going to build a thread dam there. So if I just glued that on, there's a propensity for that to pop off.
Right.
So I'm actually going to build a thread dam. So the next thing I'm going to do is just reattach my thread. Once you get that on there, then you can half hitch it so it doesn't come undone. And then I'm going to do probably a 4 to 6 turn whip finish. I may have to do 2 of those. 3, 4, 5.
Now, say you're somebody who, as I do, crowds the head sometimes.
Yep.
Can you save yourself when you use these masks by pushing back? Can you buy yourself a little bit of space?
Yep. Yes, you can. And especially, too, if you do, the biggest thing, especially if you're tying this particular pattern, you have to be cognizant of the fact that if you're going to put that mono loop in there, that you stop it well in advance of where you think that head's going to go. So one trick you can do if you're new to tying and you're going to start tying with some of these is, before you tie this particular fly, take one of the heads, put it on the front of the hook, and then now you kind of have a visual spatial thing going on, so you know exactly where you need to stop everything. And then you can go from there. Usually the first time you deal with something like that, you have to practice it a few times, but after you do it like 6 to 12 times, it becomes second nature.
Looks like it would be a deadly perch imitation.
Yeah, it can be. You know, I tie this in a variety. I mean, I think I've tied it in probably 20 to 30 different color combinations. The sky's kind of the limit because your only limiting factors are basically whatever colors you can buy rabbit strips in, and then the sparkle stuff for your brush, and then your marabou. And we all know we can find that in dozens and dozens of colors. So yellow's a good one for brown trout in dirty water. If you want to get more natural, I like shades of brown, olive, ginger, things of that nature. They're pretty more representative of some of the bait fish you will see in some of the fisheries. So,
recipe for that is in Catching Shadows?
Yep, the recipe's for it in there, and there's also, I believe, anywhere from 8 to 10 different variations of it, and it explains all of those in there as well.
That is a great tie. You've got me all fired up to try it now.
Nice.
We're going to step out. When we come back, we're going to wrap things up. Rich Strolis, Catching Shadows, with Yankee Fisherman, presented by the Dock Shop on the HAN Network. Well, there's still a bite out on the water. Most anglers have decided to stow the gear for the winter. If that's the case, keep one thing in mind. It's always summer at the Dock Shop. Just because Mother Nature isn't cooperating doesn't mean you can't see the latest models of all your favorite gear. The Dock Shop is not your average bait and tackle store. They offer a wide array of products, including apparel, jewelry, home furnishings, and some flat-out cool stuff, all with a nautical theme, most made in the USA. With 2 convenient locations, it couldn't be easier to get your fix of summer. Boater, beach bum, fisherman, or simply love the New England coast, this is a unique place to shop. The Dock Shop, 51 Tokenique Road, Darien, 609 Riverside Avenue, Westport, or on the web, dockshop.com.
I really wanted something that felt like a home. Coming from a big house, I wanted the feel of a home as opposed to a condo. The construction is incredible, whether it's the floors, the fireplace, the moldings, the lighting. It's as peaceful as my home was in the middle of the woods. It feels like a house. It does not feel like a condo or a townhome. I feel like I'm in my house.
Does buying a car leave you feeling like you're chasing your tail? Head straight to Pamby Chrysler Jeep Dodge and Ram and take car buying in a whole new direction.
In Pound Ridge since 1993, the Wine Connection is one of America's best wine shops. Visit our beautiful store for the greatest in wine and knowledgeable service. With wonderful values from around the world to collectibles for your cellar, we are your one-stop source. Visit our online shop at wineconn.com and make sure to sign up for email updates. With great offers, new arrivals, and special events, don't miss all the action at the Wine Connection, including tastings every weekend. The Wine Connection, located at 32 Westchester Avenue, Pound Ridge, New York. I'm Kate Chaplinsky. Join us for Coffee Break, weekdays at 11 to get the latest Connecticut news, weather, high school sports, and more. News doesn't get any more local than on Coffee Break on the HAN Network.
Welcome back to Yankee Fisherman, presented by the Dock Shop on the HAN Network. John Kovach with you, joined today by Rich Strolis. Rich, great looking tie.
Thank you.
That's just a fly that you can just tell is going to catch fish. Now, are you fishing that with a weighted line? There's not a lot of weight to that.
No, there's not a lot. I mean, it's a kind of I call it a transitional streamer. So it's not heavily weighted. It's not too light. It's kind of somewhere in between. So you could actually fish that on a floating line, or you could fish it on an integrated sinking line.
Now, you were just out in Denver for the fly fishing show, and we've got a couple coming up in this area. People can see you do this and talk about catching shadows the next couple of weekends?
Absolutely. This coming weekend, I'll be at the Marlboro Fishing Show, fly fishing show down in Marlboro, Mass. It's Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. The following weekend, I'll be at Somerset, New Jersey. It's the same show. And then I'm going to be all over the place this winter. Pretty much every weekend, I'm going to be somewhere. Lancaster, Pennsylvania, Michigan a couple of times. Be out in Wyoming as well, and then a bunch of different places in the fall, plus many of the local shops up country. Complete Angler I'll be doing book signings for, and then a lot of your Trout Unlimited chapters and some other fishing chapters are having me out to speak. So,
CatchingShadows.com, where we can find out about those appearances?
Absolutely.
And we will share that information as well at the Yankee Fisherman Facebook page. Also coming up, in addition to the fly fishing show, you've got the Connecticut Surfcasters Association Demo Day. We're going to be at that. That is on Saturday the 30th. Clinton Town Hall, 10 a.m. to 2:30 p.m. $5 suggested donation that goes to CSA. Connecticut DEEP is looking for care volunteers to teach kids how to fish. We're going to talk more about that on a coming show. That information's on our Facebook page. Also looking for volunteers to Maritime Aquarium in Norwalk. No prior knowledge of marine animals is necessary. Information there you can find at some of our HAN network sites. Also at maritimeaquarium.org/volunteer. Rich, thank you so much for joining us today. It's great to have somebody in. And tell us again where we can get Catching Shadows.
You can get my book at my website. Like I said, it's www.catchingshadows.com, and you can also find it on Amazon. Amazon has a listing for it, and a lot of your local fly shops are carrying it as well.
And I will see you at one of the fly shows as I stop down, probably Somerset.
Sounds good.
That's going to do it for Yankee Fisherman, presented by the Dock Shop. Thanks again to Rich Strolis. Catching Shadows, it's getting a lot of acclaim. It's selling fast. It's out there. I'm looking forward to getting a copy, and I'll read it when it's too cold to fish.